Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Entrepreneurial Audacity. Today, I'm here with Philippa, and I am so excited about this episode. We have known each other for a few weeks now, and we've had a few conversations about mindset and all things Audacity. And yeah, I've been really looking forward to doing this interview with you. So without further ado, intro, please.
Oh, thanks, Angie. That's very sweet of you. My name's Philippa Scott. I am an entrepreneur at heart. I am not sure how I would do anything else, really. I have, I think, I'm calling it 5 businesses, but some of them are interconnected, obviously. I've supported my husband in his business for 22 plus years. He's been a business owner since I met him, or nearly since I met him. And we've been together for 29 years this year. Um, but he has always done sort of more of a trade role and always kind of been in service, but never really grown a business before. And my passion is in doing things that are a bit outside the box, I guess. I'm one of those people who sometimes I'm like, maybe I should just offer something everybody already knows they want, right? But that's not kind of who I am. I tend to be out ahead of the curve, and I'm uh, creating things before people even know that they need them or want them. So my businesses include Fantastic Futures, which is where I have a parent coaching and therapy company. I have Unapologetic Edge, which is where I work with business owners, professionals, and elite businesses. So I do a lot of work around psychosocial safety and mental health in the workplace, as well as leaders who are burnt out or burning out, and leadership culture. Mentor methodology is my latest addition. It's where I help other experts create mentors in AI form. So it's a companionship learning. Um, which is super cool because it's cutting edge. And again, nobody knows they need it now. They just know what their problem is. So solving that for people. And Mumwise, which is my own mentor. So yeah, that's kind of the fifth one being my husband's business, which I'm still running until we retire him later this year.
I
So
love
that's
that.
me.
I love that. A lot going on. And yeah, I remember when we first met, we instantly connected because you do have that audacious vibe about you. And that was something that I really admired. And then hearing more of your story and some of the hurdles and challenges that you have faced has been really quite impactful for me. So do you want to give our listeners some of the background of how you decided that you were going to launch these businesses and what made you keep launching other businesses?
I guess I'm a problem solver. That's why I keep launching businesses, because I'm really good at doing lots of different things, and I like to solve problems and kind of get my hands dirty getting in there, right? So, um, but I guess to start my story, it's important to know where I've kind of come from. So, just last week, I think, or the week before. Um, it must have been the week before. I won the silver award for overcoming the odds in the Women Changing the World award. I won. Uh,
Congrats.
Thank you. I won gold for Australasia or Asia Pacific, but came second in the world's category, which was still, in my book, a great achievement. And particularly because it was for overcoming the odds. And it recognized, I guess, that overcoming the odds doesn't always look like coming from poverty or from abuse and violence and those sorts of things. Sometimes it can be about how our life operates around us and the positions that we find ourselves in, because sometimes the odds are very powerful, even when on the outside it looks dreamy. So our unconscious beliefs, our limiting beliefs, can impact us in lots of different ways. And I guess one of the things that I overcame with my in my journey to business was, I'm the mother of four neurodivergent daughters, and I needed to find a way to do life and do business around having children with higher needs, with being able to create something that met the needs of my clients whilst still meeting the needs of my family. And as you know, that's, like that can require sometimes considerable time and effort. I spent all of last week in hospital with my 21-year-old because she was having gallbladder attacks and ended up having surgery. And because of her neurodivergence and the need for psychosocial safety, that meant that my business went on hold for a week. And yeah, I had my computer and I could do bits and pieces, but it's not the same. So for me, I grew up as the eldest of three. There's actually five of us now. One who's older than me, he was adopted out at birth, and another who's this Friday we're sending him off to the army. He just turned 18. He's my dad's second marriage's offspring. So, but when we were growing up, I was the oldest of three, and my parents were Salvation Army officers. And in lots of ways, I had a very blessed childhood. We did a lot of traveling. My dad was you know, um, an entertainer as well. So we did trips around America and all sorts of interesting things, which for me was wonderful. For my sister was hell. And so, we had different outlooks on that. But one of the takeaways for me was, my mum's love language is acts of service. And as the eldest, it became my my limiting belief, or my unconscious belief, was that to be of value, I had to be doing. And then I went and had four children very, very quickly. I started at almost 26 and I finished at 32. So I had them in a fairly short period of time. And it was all fine when they were little, but when they got to teenagers, it was a whole nother ball game. But because I had this belief that to be of value, I had to be doing, I was always doing. I was the president of Friends of the Birth Centre Townsville, and I got a birth centre built up there. And I would work 20 hours a week or more whilst raising these four little kids, unpaid, in order to get this birth centre that I was never going to use opened so that other women could enjoy it. And it's still running today, nearly 19 years later. It still operates. And for me, that's a huge uh, achievement, but it was at considerable cost. I continued to do that kind of thing, and I burnt out ultimately from that. And then I went and I dug myself into corporate world when the kids got a bit older. When my youngest was 3.5, I went into corporate. And I got the career acceleration, within 4 years, I was where nobody had been before in that period of time. I'd reached the goal that I'd set myself. I was running my own deck. I had a $16 million a year sales budget, and I was running a team, and then they discovered that I had a brain aneurysm, and that I needed to not have stress. So I couldn't work 7 days a week anymore. I needed to actually have some balance in my life. And so we moved back home to the Sunshine Coast, and I gave up everything that I'd worked really hard for. And you've got to remember, I moved four children and my husband and the dog 8 times in 5 years, twice overseas,
Damn.
in order to get you know, these promotions and to follow the corporate ladder. And I did that willingly, wanting it, but to give that up because I couldn't keep up, because physically I was exhausted, that was a real blow. So fast forward a little bit, and I changed companies, and I was only working 6 days a week. So yay. Uh,
Woohoo.
right, but I was still
One less.
right. So I was still working 50 hours a week. I was doing a university degree. So I was doing a bachelor's degree. I was doing a Cert 4. I had 4 kids going through at that point. The first one was going through her diagnosis. It then followed the others. Um, Trying to figure out what the hell was going on with these kids, and how was I failing at that? Like, it had always been so easy before, but high school and neurodivergence and all of those sorts of things were really taking its toll. Um, and so I I got to a point where physically I couldn't function. I was falling asleep on the couch at 7 o'clock at night. I was leaving ham on the bench. I was taking 6 wrong turns getting to work. There weren't even 6 turns to take to get to work. And I was all of a sudden, everything was falling apart,
Yeah.
and I was not okay.
Yeah.
So I thought, "Oh, well, I'll find a job with less pressure." Right? Because that was my answer was, well, maybe it was just I had too much pressure in my life. So I went looking for a job, and I found this incredible job, which literally she was talking to me. She wanted somebody who had sales experience, but who also understood working with people, and who understood mental health and things like that. And I was like, oh my God, she's actually calling to me. Like, this is my job. Um, and I don't normally do this, but I just did this deep dive into her YouTube channel, and I resurfaced about 5 hours later, and I was like, I don't care if she gives me the job. And I emailed her that. I said, I've applied for your job, but I don't care if you don't give it to me. I have to do this process because I don't have any trauma, I said, but I have all the symptoms. And she laughed at me because, of course, we all mitigate our trauma, you know. And so I applied for the job. She found me somebody to do it with. And 15 days later, my nervous system had reset back to what is our normal physiological homeostasis of calm. And I've never gone back to that place of dysregulation again.
Thank you so much for, covering all of that. That's really interesting, Philippa. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the burnout? So, you were experiencing a lot of burnout, and then you quite quickly went into this state of calm. So what were the
Mm.
differences that you found, and like how was that period when you transitioned from high stress, high stakes to calm?
Okay. All right. So to answer that question, we need to understand the physiology of trauma. Okay. So we're going to have a lesson.
Love
All right.
this.
So
Let's
the
go.
way it works is like, okay, so the way it works is like this. So we are designed to sit at calm, right? That's how we are designed. If you lived in the Amazon or in Iceland or somewhere where you just, where life was calm, you would be calm all the time. But we don't live there, right? We live in the Western world where from the time we are little, we experience stress and high levels of stress ongoingly, particularly, anyone born, from Generation X on, we were the latchkey kids, right? There was some research came out recently saying that the Generation X are the most emotionally resilient generation because they were neglected so badly. Right? So now that's not a good thing because resilience, my keynote talk is called When Resilience Curdles into Resentment.
I like that. That's quite
Because
powerful.
Right? Because resentment is not meant to be somewhere where we live. We are meant to wander into resilience when we need it and then just wander back out again when it's not needed anymore. If we're staying in resilience, we're stuck. And we're in on mode, and we're not meant to be in on mode all the time. We're actually meant to sit at calm, homeostasis just being, we're good, right? All fine. So what happens is we release these stress hormones when there's stress, and then we return to calm. And then we, maybe have a life-threatening event. We go all the way up to fight, flight, freeze. We release those stress hormones, and then we return to calm. That's how it's meant to work. But because we're not living in a world where that is supported or whatever, well, often we get stuck in that fight, flight, freeze space. And I talk to people every day who are like, I'm in fight, flight, freeze. Yeah. So fight, flight, freeze could be the hyper aroused state of fight or flight, that anxious state, or the shut down freeze state of depression. But what's behind both anxiety and depression is the same thing. It's the whole system screaming, I'm not safe, right? And that might be because of unconscious core beliefs, right? Or it might be because of trauma that's happened. So, and trauma isn't always war or being held at gunpoint or domestic violence or any of those things, right? It can often be far more insidious, like to be a value you need to be doing, right? That burnt me out crazy big time because I felt like if I was going to be, when your mum's love language is acts of service, you learn to be doing in order to be loved. Right? That's what keeps, because your whole programming as a child is to make sure that you have a secure attachment with a primary care provider. And so your job is to make sure that there is a connection there and that you are you're in that attachment. Now, when we're less than 7 or 8, we don't necessarily do that in a really mature way, right? Because we're not mature, we're children.
Yeah.
So what keeps us safe when we're 5 is to be a people pleaser, overcompensate, maybe hide, be less of who we are, not interrupt. Don't express yourself. Maybe your job is to, take care of everyone around you, because what if the volatile parent, responds? So you control everybody and yourself, but those things that kept you safe when you were 5 are not necessarily going to allow you to thrive at 35, 45, and 55, right? They're going to keep you stuck. Those unconscious beliefs, it's like you're an iPhone 17 with beautiful functionality available within your hardware, but if you're running Nokia 3110 software, you can make a call, send a text message, and play that snake game, and that's it,
Yeah.
right?
Perfect.
so your software is often running old software, and it's also kind of like your how you has your car got lane assist?
No, mine doesn't, but I've
Okay.
drove the ones that do, and I find it super annoying. I don't know about anyone else, but
Right. So I love mine because I'm a lazy driver and I don't care to drive, right? Like do it all for me. I'm happy to just sit there. But when you've picked lane assist, it's going to keep you in that safe lane. If you take your hands off the wheel, it'll take you around the bend in the highway and keep you on the road. And it's designed to do that, right? But it essentially, you've said, this is the safe lane, we're staying here. Okay. If you want to change the lane, if you don't put the indicator on, you've got to fight the car to do it. And your unconscious beliefs are like that, not because they are trying to sabotage you, but because they're actually trying to keep you safe. The problem is, if you picked the safe lane when you were little, it's not necessarily going to get you where you want to go when you're an adult. And so getting you flicking that indicator on and moving lanes is the trick, right? So the next part of that physiology lesson is that when we have traumas, and trauma being a big T trauma or a little T trauma, right? If you have, it might be, my mum's hitting me now, I'm about to die now, like there's a fire coming now, whatever the event was. When you have these events, your body responds with stress hormones, and the stress hormones shut down certain parts of your body, right? If you are, if you're running from a tiger, you don't have to digest your Weet-Bix, so your gut shuts down, right? And you're not doing higher maths, so your frontal lobe shuts down, right? And all of those pieces, all that energy gets funneled into your thighs so you can run or climb, right? So sometimes though, and one of the parts of the brain that shuts down is called the hippocampus. It's responsible for long-term memory. And when a system's not in balance, the memory part can stay in shutdown mode. It doesn't come back on, do its job, and put that memory in the warehouse of memory and go, oh, well, that's over now. Shut it down and file it away. Instead, it stays in the unconscious. Consciously, you know it's over, but the unconscious thinks it's happening now. It's why gut issues and trauma are so related, right? So this trauma is running in your unconscious. It's happening now. I'm about to die now. My mom's hitting me now, or whatever it is, right? And that event when you were 3, when you were 7, when you were 27, 47, whatever, it's happening now as far as the unconscious is concerned. And the unconscious is running your body, right? We know that because you've never once had to tell your gallbladder to release bile to deal with your dinner. All that stuff, thankfully, happens without you doing anything, but your unconscious system does it. So all of that stuff is being done without you. But if your unconscious thinks that you're not safe, it's going to continue to run the body like it's not safe. Okay. So what that means is that your whole system is on high alert. Your whole system is operating as if there is danger in everything, right? And it's just waiting for the next thing. It's just waiting, right? It's all happening. And so that's where I was. I was sitting in that hyper aroused state of fight or flight. And it's exhausting. Your adrenals are constantly releasing extra adrenal, like cortisol and adrenaline and all of that stuff, right? So eventually my adrenals just went, no,
I'm out.
we're not, right? And they tapped out. They literally went, we are not operating anymore at all. That's what adrenal fatigue is, right? It simply says, no, we're not doing anything. We're going to take a little break. This is holiday time and you're just going to have to deal with it. But what that meant was that I didn't have any capacity for anything because I had no hormone peaks to give me any of the energy to deal with the stress or the turmoil or anything, right? And to give you an example, like obviously I just had a daughter in hospital this last week and I spent that week quite calm, right? But what was really interesting was when I got home and I could stand down, I noticed the shift in my system, right? And I went into um, I had to release some stuff. I actually had to have a little tear and a cuddle, and it was only little, but I needed to just let that go and shift back into. I felt calm through it, but you can feel calm through a crisis. But
Absolutely.
then as soon as it was over, right? We got home. I'd been home 10 minutes, and I just reset,
Yeah.
right? Rather than stay in hyper aroused state, because that's not actually where we're meant to be. Then that's resilience, right? Resilience means I could be resilient for a week. I could do without sleep for a week. I could be there for her and be hyper vigilant in all the things I needed to be to make sure she was okay. I could do that for a week. But the difference is as soon as I didn't need to, I could let it go. And I shifted. Right? And
Yeah.
that's what resilience is meant to be. That's how your system's meant to work. So when I did TRTP and did that work, so TRTP being the Richards trauma process, we first session changed the unconscious core beliefs so I wasn't locked into that. Second, turned off the videotape loops so that my whole nervous system went, oh, it's over. And my hippocampus rebooted and the whole system just returned to calm. And then session 3 was planning the future. And so literally have never gone back to feeling like that. I have not come close in that last 6.5 years to being anything like burnt out,
I
you
love
know,
that. And
at all.
I love that you brought the fact of the safety part with our brains, because that's our hardwiring, minimize threat, maximize reward, and keep us safe. And when we
Yeah.
dive into the realm of the unknown and start businesses and lean out into those ventures that put us into those moments of being aroused and, like, okay, we've got to be on alert because we're not too sure what's going to happen and we're really uncertain on the future. But I really love that have highlighted the point of being able to return back. And,
Mhm.
if I look at so many people who are quite high up, quite successful, and I'm a big one for meditation. And I always ask a lot of people when you can clearly see that they're stressed, it's like, okay, like, what are your calming things that you do? Do you have any kind of routine or something that helps bring you back to that baseline of a state of calm? And a lot of people don't, or they think that it's a little bit, a little bit hippie, like, oh, meditation. For years I thought me sitting still and not doing anything for 20 minutes, like I'm going to be doing that. But now I know that it's part of my routine every single day that I do it. And when I haven't been doing that, yeah, you find yourself, you do kind of glue to that intense, all right, what's next? What's next? And it's not until you're like, oh, hold on a second, you need to like reprogram and bring yourself back to that baseline safety. So I'd love to get your thoughts on, have you got strategies and things that you implement? Because I noticed, you mentioned that you had a cry and a cuddle after the situation with your daughter. So a lot of people probably think, when we talk of in terms of resilience, they just be like, oh, just get on with it, like when we just get on with it, just push through it. It's fine. It's done. It's done. I know I had that programming for a lot, but how important is it to just have those moments of whether it be a cuddle or a cry or a little meditation, like how important is that in returning us back to our baseline state?
Oh, it's paramount. The thing uh, about life is that we are here to learn, right? Um, your emotions are designed to teach you something. They're communication, and this is where a lot of parents go wrong too, right? Because they see behavior as behavior, right? And you and I would have been brought up by behavioralists, right? Behavior is, if you're not behaving properly, then you're not, you know, then that's in and of itself the problem.
Yep.
But actually, behavior is communication. So is feelings, right? And in our culture, we stop this process for kids all the time, right? And I watch my husband do it with our granddaughter. She's almost 3. She's the most divine thing you've ever
Of
seen,
course.
right?
No bias at all. I
She's
love
so
it.
she's so sassy. It's crazy, right? So, but when we she'll be upset about something. So let's say, and there's this confusion around gentle parenting versus permissive parenting, right? We get a lot of people who are like, I'm not gonna, like gentle parenting's the problem with the world. Well, gentle parenting's not the problem with the world if you do gentle parenting. But if you do permissive parenting, that's a problem, right? So what we're really looking for is, so when I say to Paisley, no, you're not having that second chocolate before dinner. That's enough now. And she loses it because she's 2 going on 3, and she'll be crying and she'll be angry and she'll be upset. And Trevor will say, "Don't cry. It's okay. Like, you don't have to be upset." Or he'll be like, "Stop it." I'm like, "Trev, it's actually okay. She's allowed to cry and be angry that she can't have what she wants. She's 2, and what she thinks she wants, she thinks she needs, right? So she doesn't have the emotional capacity to know the difference between want and need right now. So it's okay for her to get angry about it. It's fine." But what Gordon Neufeld and Gabor Mate talk about is this cycle of maturation, which is important, which is the cycle that we have to go through where we go to futility. So we realize after we have this anger or whatever, we go through futility and we realize that actually we're not going to get what we want. And then we have sadness because it's futile and we're not going to get what we want. And then we go through adaptation. right? And without that cycle of maturity, we just have a whole bunch of adults out there who are really immature. And that's why we have things like road rage and all the other stuff, right? Because everybody thinks that they should just get what they want all the time. And they've never been facilitated to go through this maturation process. So when Paisley has these moments of um, expressing her anger, I'm like, go for it. You don't get to hurt anybody. You don't get to hurt yourself or whatever, but you can absolutely express your anger. What is the anger there for? It's to teach her something, right? So if I'm experiencing sadness, or in this moment I was experiencing relief, right? Those things are there to teach me. So I learned that I had been on high alert for the past week, and now I was coming off that. So I learned something about myself. I also understood that I was grateful to be coming down. And that I actually needed to honor what I'd been through, and I had a bubble bath. Right? I had a
Beautiful.
bath. I actually just let everything, that was I had a cuddle, and I had a bath.
Yep.
And I just let all of those muscles go. And that's what I needed. Now, didn't cost me anything, right? But it's just what I needed to do to just let that moment pass and move into a new state of relaxation. So, but if I didn't listen to the lesson, if I didn't hear what my body was saying, I never get the opportunity to learn from it, honor it, and move forward. So I teach my clients, if you get an emotion, if you're experiencing an emotion, whether it's sadness or joy or anger or frustration, it's going to teach you something. And then your job is to think about, what do I need to think, feel, or experience in this moment to be okay? What do I need? Right. And for a lot of my clients, we go through a process called that Judith teaches, called embodied declarations, where instead of doing affirmations, because affirmations are fine, but they're not really as powerful. I can stand in front of the mirror and I can say, I'm smart. And my brain goes, yeah, but you went to the grocery store yesterday, you had your list in your bag and you still forgot 17 things, and that's not smart,
Yeah.
right? Whereas if I instead stand there and I say, I choose to know I am smart, right? Very, very different scenario, because I'm choosing to know something about myself, right? And so that opens up a whole different layer. And so that piece right there, learning, so being curious rather than judging my feelings, right? We judge our feelings so often, right? But just being curious, what's it here to teach me? And then being honoring that, and then moving to the next phase of what do I need to think, feel, or experience, and giving that to myself. That's my go-to process.
Yeah.
You can probably hear my granddaughter
We
outside,
can.
having a cry.
Beautiful.
She wants to come
Just
in.
right in succinct timing, like exhibit. I love that. That's fun. Presley, was her name Presley?
Paisley.
Paisley, I was close. We hear you, girl. That's really funny because, and the thought, like, thank you for sharing that, Philippa. That's beautiful. And it's so well said. And I think a lot of people really need to hear that, because we do have so many people that drive around and get road rage. And, I'm still quite young and on my journey, because I've studied neuroscience, now knowing about the brain and about, emotional regulation and working through stuff, fight, flight, or stress, like all of the things. You can see the patterns in people when they don't actually have it, and when they don't have the ability to regulate their emotions and think and understand what they need and reprogram themselves and move forward in it to get to a calmer state. So, I know that we're going to have a lot of entrepreneurs that are on the journey in some way, shape, or form on this podcast. So I'd love to get your thoughts, or what advice would you give to, say, like, the entrepreneurs or the people who are just starting out and they think that I need to be doing everything. I've got to always on the go. If I'm not busy, I'm not making money. Like, how would you, who are in that stressed state and that aroused state, what would you say to them, and how would you encourage them to lean in and understand and know more about what's driving that behavior?
Well, I guess the first thing is be curious. Ask, allow, and, get some support. It's okay to ask for support, whether that's a coach or a therapist or a combination of both. Not many people do both. I do, but, have somebody who can actually reflect back to you. Like I was working with somebody today and, talking about, gone back to a partner, that was still being toxic, that had been toxic. And she said to me, "You don't believe me, do you?" I said, "It's not that I don't believe you. I'm curious. I'm curious about why you've chosen to go back at this point. And I think you should be curious about why you've chosen to go back at this point. If we want to know what's behind something, we need to genuinely ask ourselves about why we think we're doing it, right? What's the story we're telling ourselves?" On my website, I have some blogs, and one of them is the idea of the 4 Ps, right? So the founder of positive psychology came up with the first 3 Ps: personal, pervasive, and permanency. But perspective is also there too, right? So we need to understand, first of all, what story is it that we're running right now, and then often we're on personal, right? If it's personal, we think it's about us, right? We're the problem. If it's perspective, we think it's a story we're telling ourselves about somebody else. So I'll give you an example of that. I came home a few months back and we were having visitors over. I'd worked in the morning, I'd gone and got groceries, and I came home, and just before I got home, I was like, crap, I forgot to tell the kids to vacuum upstairs, and I'm going to need people to help me get the groceries out of the car because these people are coming in 10 minutes and we're so not ready, right? And I got home and kids were running around doing stuff, vacuuming all the things, and Trevor was really cranky with them. I'm like, "Why are you cranky?" He said, "Well, they're only just doing stuff now." I said, "Why is that a problem?" He said, "Well, when did you ask them?" I said, 10 minutes ago. He thought I'd asked them the night before in the morning. And so he had told himself a story about our children and their behavior, right? So he'd decided something about them. And then there's pervasive. So instead of going, "You know what? I have great health. I have a great family, great relationship. My work life needs a little balance right now. I need to work on some stuff there." We just go, everything's a problem. Or like our whole life is ruined, right? Because of this one thing. The other one is permanency. So um, how long is this a problem for? Right? We think that it's going to be a problem forever, even though it actually might be an issue for a week, or it might be a problem for a year, you know. But instead we're like, it's all gone. And the easy way to understand, to remember this, is we either think I'm fucked, you're fucked, everything's fucked, or it's fucked forever, right?
I love that.
Okay, so that's the easy way to go. All right, what am I thinking? What's the pattern I'm in? Because that'll keep you stuck, right? So it's a starting point to kind of think about, well, where am I sitting right now, and being curious about that, because some of those things can be resolved by a little bit of logic and asking ourselves, is it actually me? Do I need clarity on that story? Is this a problem with them? Do I know that that's true? Like, how long is this a problem for? Let's get a bit of reality in here. Actually, it's only one space in my life that needs work, so these are the kinds of things that make a big difference. But only with curiosity can we do that. If we start applying judgment to everything, that's when we're going to have a big problem. And look, it's reasonable and fair that most of us go to judgment initially, and we do that predominantly because from the time we enter school, preschool, anything like that, we are in a judgment-filled space. We are judged from the moment we step out into normal culture, right? So we are brought up to judge ourselves and put a value on everything, but not everything needs a value. And it certainly doesn't need a value before we understand it or have made a conscious decision on how we want to value that, right? Sometimes we value it based on what we think other people think we should, and that's not cool either. So I guess I would encourage people to think curiously about what their story is, and then where does that story come from. And it was in me leaning into what story am I telling myself that I discovered that actually my mother's love language, being acts of service, was causing me to show up in a story of I have to be doing to be of value. Right. So again, allowed myself to be in curiosity, and then I choose to know my value comes from being, not from doing. I
Yeah,
choose to know it's okay for me to do nothing when nothing is there to be done.
that's really powerful.
Wonderful.
And,
Mm.
I can only imagine the inner work that you've gone through to get to that point and to figure out, whoa, actually, this stemmed from way back then, because a lot of people would just be running on autopilot with these things going on in the background and not understanding the story and the narrative that's living in our brain as to why we're doing things. So I love that you've brought that in. And I love that, you've been able to uncover that and tie into those beliefs and, give yourself permission to go through and figure that out. I'd love to know from your perspective, like if I was someone who was still jumping around and unsure of, because we get in our heads a lot of the time. So you might consciously be able to see, okay, I know that this thing's fucked, but everything's fucked. How do you get, or how would you advise someone to get out of that cycle? Because one thing, and I say this because I've gone through the inner journey of being able to recognize logically in my mind. I'm like, okay, I can see this, but then in my brain's gone, actually, no, 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 it's gone crazy. So, what are your thoughts on that? Like, how do you close that bridge? Because yeah, first step is awareness, second step is action, but doing the action, that's the hard part that we really get strung up with, because it's like, okay, great. I know that I should be doing this, but my brain is just in hyperdrive. So what are your thoughts on that?
Often we need a pattern interrupt. Because we are creatures of habit, and we think that resilience is something, and busyness is a badge, burnout's a badge that we wear with honor. And so we get to a point where we just think that it's supposed to be like that. And sometimes we need something that interrupts that pattern. And sometimes that's working with somebody. That's somebody like me going, really? Because here's another option for you, right? And it doesn't have to be mean or rude or any of those things, right? It can just be a matter of, well, actually, are you aware that there's some more stuff around that? Or actually, have you thought about where that might come from? And actually, just having somebody who's prepared to um, give you an outside thought. Sometimes we're so caught up in our own thinking, we need somebody from the outside to go, yeah, but have you thought about it this way? You know? And so that's the value of having a coach or a therapist, right? Is somebody to bring a different perspective. But you do have to want it. You actually need to want the change. And if you don't want the change, it's okay, but at least acknowledge that you want to be where you're at. And, I think sometimes we're in a season, like we can be in a season for hustle within our business. We can be in a season for growth. We can be in a season for learning. Like there are lots of different seasons that we can be in. And again, if we allow ourselves to be curious and say, all right, well, this is the season that I'm in. If I want to shift seasons, something has to happen. And the beautiful thing about TRTP is it's actually not hard work. Like I feel so privileged to have found this, because actually what I do, like the work we do doesn't require you to be really smart and figure all this stuff out, right? I've done lots of extra learning, but even just in my learning to do TRTB, I learned how to figure out what you're stuck in, because the pattern that comes up in your life is linked to an unconscious core belief. And every pattern has a few unconscious core beliefs that lock the pattern in, right? So once you find the pattern, you can find the unconscious core belief. Right? That's the easy bit. Being willing to recognize the pattern, that's the harder piece. But if you can find a way to interrupt the pattern, and for some people that's simply driving a different way to work. You know, sometimes it's about choosing to sit at a different, changing your office around. Sometimes it's about, I don't know, eating with using your fork in a different hand, or drying your body a different way. Interrupting your pattern can be really simple sometimes, but it starts to change the way your neural pathways work, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
And I like that, because it is a pattern interruption. And circling back to something that you said with, noticing what season you're in, because
mm,
sometimes we can see that we need to do things, or we're aware, but then going and doing things. And I love that you brought that in, just accepting that, okay, this is the season for me to just think everything's a bit fucked right now. And I'm just going to allow myself to roll with that until that pattern interruption happens. And then you can move forward from it, because, and the research does state this, that things will come into our conscious awareness, and then we can't act on everything straight away, because our brains don't work like that. Sometimes we need processing time. And sometimes the processing time is just, taking a different route to work and just letting our brains mull over everything. And, throughout my journey, there's been times where I've done a lot of self-development, and then someone said something to me, like a coach or someone, and you just don't want to hear what they have to say at that point, because you're not ready. And then you kind of go,
yeah.
yeah, whatever, I'm going to do whatever I'm going to do anyway, and just whatevs. And then you keep going on. And then it's not until a couple of weeks later or whenever that it circles back and you have that moment of insight. And it's like, oh, right. Now I see what they meant. Now you can move forward and through it, because it's so important that we're able to do that, but it's really hard. And, I know a lot of business owners and people who go into the entrepreneurial world go into these highly stressful states. They want to be doing all of the things, and relaxing is, no, we can't relax. We've got to be on, we've got to be grinding, we've got to be doing all the things. They're in the season of hustle all of the time, but really needing to understand that actually it's okay to be calm. And that's a
Mm.
good thing, and work through those things and see like what bottlenecks are coming up in terms of your limiting beliefs and what's actually holding you back from certain aspects of your business. Because one thing, I can never remember who says this quote, but your business will expose every part of you that needs self-development, because your business is a reflection of what's going on the inside. So, what are your thoughts on that?
It's almost like parenting, right? It's like a big ass mirror.
Yep.
Just
Yep.
shows you every fault and flaw and struggle. Like it because you have to, it requires you to elevate and to change fundamentally. You'll change who you are. Motherhood changes the way your brain is wired. Literally changes the wiring in your brain. Matrescence is not, it's like adolescence. New neural pathways are being formed. The brain actually contracts to expand. And when you do something like birth a business, you have to start thinking in new ways. You actually are required to be in a state of, I don't fucking know, right? Sometimes you'll be there. You won't know what to do. And you're going to have to figure it out. Now, there's two ways to do that. You can do that and go, okay, I'm gonna, I'm gonna figure this out, or you can lose your shit. And often and look, this is so true, particularly of Gen X women, but even probably millennials as well. we've been cultured to think that we have to do it all. We have to do it ourselves. If we ask for help, we've failed, right? And school does that to us, right? They want us to answer or ask the question, but most of the time they want us to answer the question, right? There's this piece where to ask for help, especially if you've been, at a school where asking for help wasn't supported, where, maybe they were too busy to attend to everyone, or if you asked too many times, you got ridiculed or whatever. And so if you process even a little bit differently than the majority, you end up feeling left behind or like you're not good enough, and then you don't ask for help. But interestingly, if you can get guidance on things and ask for help, you'll elevate far quicker. There's there's a business coach that I like, and so Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach wrote 3 books with Dr. Benjamin Harding. And so he's a psychology, like a writer of psychology stuff. And they wrote 3 books together. Ben wrote them, but were based on Dan's stuff. And the 3 books are fascinating. I learned something really unique in each of them. The first one was The Gap and the Gain, right? So they talk about the fact that happiness doesn't lie in reaching your goal, because as humans, we're always going to give ourselves a new goal, right? We're going to go, if we start walking towards the horizon is constantly moving. Okay, so we're never going to get there. But happiness actually lies in how far have I come? Where was I 6 months ago? Where was I 5 years ago? Where was I 10 years ago? How far have I come? Because we will always move the goals, right? And we very rarely actually celebrate when we get to one. And if we do, it's short-lived because we're on to the next thing, right? So think like celebrating how far we've come, that's a really big advantage. The second book is called Who Not How. So they talk about this idea of procrastination, and a lot of us in business procrastinate, right? We procrastinate about some pieces. Those are the pieces that somebody else should be doing. So if you are procrastinating on something, ask yourself why. Is this actually something I should be outsourcing? Because it's not my genius zone. So really leaning into the gift of genius zone. So what is your genius zone, and how do you help somebody else fulfill on their genius zone, right? Because if you're not doing your genius zone and they're not doing theirs, you're actually not helping the world go round. And often they can do something far better and far quicker than you can, and allow you to do what you do far quicker and far better. Right? So fabulous book. And then the last one was 10x is easier than 2x. And they talk about, doubling your business being really hard work, partly because to double your business usually requires you to do double the amount of work, right? And not very many people want to do double the amount of work, right? But 10xing your business is about you having to do everything differently. So you have to pull it all apart and put it back together and think about it completely differently. So when I'm looking at my business, whichever one it is, I'm thinking, how do I 10x this? How do I create this now for 10 times that? What's the process? What needs to be in place now in order for that to occur? Because there's excitement in that, right? There's strategy there. It's not just about getting up and doing a thing. It's about really thinking strategically about how that's all going to look. So I know that's gone off topic a little bit, but those things, there are some great resources out there when we think about the kind of the way we look at our business and the way that we show up within it. Because if we're showing up without any guidance at all, and the beautiful thing about today's world is you don't have to go to the library and borrow a book. You don't have to go and buy a lot of books. And I'm an author, you're an author. Like books are cool. You can listen to a book on audio. You can listen to a podcast, and you can, all of these things are available to us. We have a plethora of information available. But what most of us lack is guidance. And this is the foundation of mentor methodology, is that you can have ChatGPT give you information. What you don't have in that space is guidance. And guidance is what we have forever relied upon. Somebody who's walked in your shoes, somebody who's been there, who can show you how. That's how we learn. It's how, so never underestimate the value of guidance and what that can actually achieve in your life,
Yeah,
whether that's your mental health or your
I
business.
think that's a beautiful point because, yeah, as you say, it's such an important thing. And people have walked in our shoes. That's a beautiful thing. And how well connected we are at the moment. You can find information, you can find resources, you can find someone that you really gel with to work with as well. I think that's a really important thing when you do go and choose, like, who am I going to get guidance from? Like, you want them to have walked the path that you're on or similar, and be able to guide you through where you're going. You got to gel with the person as well, because sometimes not everyone is for everyone. And I know I don't get along with everyone. Not everyone gets along with me, and that's totally fine. Like, we're human beings, so that's all good. But yeah, I think, like, tying back to your point of having guidance, getting guidance throughout the journey as well, because when you dive into entrepreneurship, it can be lonely, can be hard, it can be challenging. And a lot of the times, yeah, you're sitting there. What do I do? How do I do? What's my genius zone? You might be the expert in your field with this part of your business, but yeah, outsource what you need to outsource, because it does tie up your time. And I think if, I've gotten a lot of value from our conversation, as I always do. I love our chats, but I know that our listeners are going to take a lot from this. And yeah, I think it's a beautiful point of knowing when you need guidance, when you're in the season of, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm doing, and like how you move forward and how you take that and then apply it to your business. And I loved your point on the 10xing thing, because how often do we think strategically on scaling a business from the start when we dive into things, and we're all caught up in the doing. We're doing all the things, we're doing this, we're doing that. I've got so many hats on, but I'm not outsourcing anything. And like at 10 times this business revenue, I wouldn't be doing these things. So I think that's a really good point to think about and consider, because, I think just using that angle when you do go into entrepreneurship will help, because it allows you to take that step back. And if you do it right from the start, like, how often do we hear, if we do it right from the start, you see way easier outcome than needing to go and change everything on the back end later on,
100%. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, I've set up so MumWise and mentor methodology
yeah,
are 100% set up for 10x growth. Like, but that's just the thing, when you've done it more than once, you you learn, right? Like, so you get to see what works and what doesn't. And so, yeah, setting things up to actually be um, truly scalable,
yeah,
and to deliver real value along the way.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I love that. So I've got a couple of questions that I ask
Okay.
all of my guests, and they come on the show. And Philippa, I'd love to know what Audacity means to you.
Oh, gosh. I think for me, it's probably about being truly courageous. If you, it's not about being loud or being a- ahead of everything. I think if you are audacious, you are willing to step into courage, because courage, and Dan Sullivan actually said this. He said, people confuse courage and confidence all the time. Confidence is comfortable, right? I'm a confident person, happy to talk on a platform, no problem at all. Confidence, easy, right? Courage is uncomfortable. So audacity for me is about being able to do the thing that is uncomfortable but courageous anyway, and having the confidence to back yourself to do the uncomfortable.
I like that.
That's what I think.
I like that. Beautifully said. It is. It is. I love it. It's yeah, it's one of those words that's just resonated me, and it was the inspiration behind everything. 'Cause, I
Mm.
know so many people have these beautiful talents and skills and ideas that I would just love to see come to fruition, but a lot of the time people don't have that courage and they don't step into that discomfort to strive
Mm.
to build on something. And I get, entrepreneurship is not for everyone, like a lot. It's a lot, right? When you're building all these things and you've got all the projects on and you're like, everything's fucked right now. What's going on? Trying to navigate that is hard. But I'm
Yeah.
hoping that, and I know that this conversation would have inspired a lot of people. Like I always get stuff from our conversations, like I said before, but you know, it's a normal thing. This process is normal. It's a normal
Mm.
thing that not only business owners and people who dive into like entrepreneurship go through, we all go through it. A lot of the stuff that we've just covered, like it's applicable to everyone. We all put limiting beliefs in ourselves. We keep ourselves in those comfort zones. We don't actually lean out and venture and see how we can move forward. So
Yeah.
yeah, this has been a beautiful conversation, Philippa. Last thing I would like from you is what is one piece of advice that you would give to our entrepreneurs in the making?
Understand the law of constraints and where it's impacting you and your business. So the law of constraints says that productivity, it moves through capacity, right? So if you have the capacity to bring 20 clients into your business but only serve 5, you have a constraint there, right? But if you've got the capacity to invoice 50 but only deliver to 4, you've got constraint issues somewhere. So understand where the law of constraints is impacting you and then where it's going to impact you once you fix that bit. That alone will save you a whole lot of headache, because if you think about your business from that perspective as simply constraint followed by constraint, where's the constraint now? Knowing it's always going to move and it's always going to be a thing that you've got to be out ahead of. And often that constraint is going to be you. And, we met at Empire Mastery, and one of the things that Aaron Sansoni said was that business owners, and I believe parents alike, don't treat themselves like they are their own best asset. You are your business's best asset. Your mental health, your perspectives, and the way your brain works runs everything. And if what's going on in here is fucked, so is everything else. And somewhere along the line, the law of constraints is going to get you. And it might not get you now, it might get you when you're doing $20 million a year, but it'll get you. And often the bigger it is when you fall, the harder it all falls down, right? So it's really important to understand that law of constraints and where you sit within it so that you can get out ahead of it and ask for help, because there is nothing wrong with asking for help. That's my soapbox moment.
I love that. And you are so correct. We can't do things alone, and we shouldn't, because there's so much knowledge out in the world. Like, lean on other people, So speaking of asking for help, Philippa, where can people find you? How can they connect with you? Obviously, as always, we'll have all of our contact details in the show notes, but yeah, anything that you want to add?
You can find me all over Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the things. Probably the most relevant pages for this audience will be Unapologetic Edge. So you can go to unapologeticedge.com. You can find me at Unapologetic Edge on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, admin at unapologeticedge.com. I'd love to connect. You can get on, you can do the burnout audit for free. Tell you where you're at right now. That can be surprising for people. Um, but yeah, I'm all over the place and very, very willing to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love that. Well, thank you for your time, Philippa. This has been absolutely awesome. Yeah. Until next time, I can't wait to do this again.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Angie.